The Zephyrian Imperial fleet moved through space like hungry sharks sensing blood in the water. 12 massive warships glided past the outer planets of the Sol system with their weapons powered and shields glowing bright blue against the darkness. Admiral Vexithara stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the third planet grow larger on the main screen. Earth looked small and defenseless from this distance, a blue marble spinning quietly in the void. The Zephyrians had conquered 17 star systems in the past 10 years. Each time the pattern was the same. They would arrive with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and within hours the local species would submit or die. Their intelligence reports on this new system called it a backwater world inhabited by primitive creatures who had barely learned to leave their home planet. The humans would be no different from all the others. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the UES Retribution and studied the approaching alien fleet on his tactical display. The ship was humanity's newest warship, sleek and deadly, with experimental weapons that had never been tested in real combat. Morrison was 42 years old, with gray starting to show in his black hair, and he had been chosen to command this prototype vessel because of his reputation for creative thinking under pressure. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez monitored the sensor arrays, her dark eyes focused on the incoming data streams. Commander Lisa Park stood beside Morrison's chair, her blonde hair pulled back in regulation style. Chief Engineer Danny Wright called up from the engine room that all systems were running perfectly. The new fusion reactors were producing more power than any human ship had ever carried before. Morrison had read the intelligence reports about the Zephyrian Empire. They were conquerors who believed in overwhelming force and quick victories. Their technology was impressive, but their tactics were predictable. They expected their enemies to either surrender immediately or put up a brief fight before being crushed. What they did not expect was an opponent who refused to follow the rules they were used to. The Retribution drifted in space near the asteroid belt, its hull dark and almost invisible against the star field. The ship was much smaller than the approaching alien vessels, but it carried weapons and defensive systems that pushed the boundaries of human engineering. Morrison had hand-picked his crew from the best officers in the fleet, and every person on board knew they were about to make history. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from her console with concern in her voice. The alien ships were massive, each one 3 times larger than the Retribution. Their hulls were covered in some kind of advanced armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Energy readings showed they had powerful shields and weapons that could probably destroy a human city with a single shot. Morrison ordered the communications officer to open a channel to the lead alien ship. The main screen flickered and showed the face of Admiral Vexithara. She was tall and imposing with scaled green skin and 4 eyes that glowed with predatory intelligence. When she spoke, the universal translator converted her words into perfect English. The alien admiral's message was simple and direct. Humanity would surrender their world immediately and serve the Zephyrian Empire as slaves. Any resistance would result in the complete destruction of human civilization. She gave them exactly 1 minute to respond before the attack would begin. Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. None of them showed fear or surprise. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing it might be humanity's last stand. Commander Park raised an eyebrow and shook her head slightly. Chief Wright's voice came over the intercom saying the weapons were charged and ready. Lieutenant Rodriguez reported that all systems were green. The captain turned back to the alien admiral on the screen and spoke in a calm, steady voice. He told her that her demand was rejected. This was human space and the aliens were not welcome here. He suggested they turn around and leave while they still had the chance. Admiral Vexithara's 4 eyes blinked in what seemed like confusion, then narrowed with anger. She could not believe that a single primitive vessel was threatening her entire fleet. The humans' arrogance would be their doom. No species had ever survived contact with the Imperial fleet, and these humans would not be the first. Morrison smiled grimly as the communication ended. He knew the aliens thought they were facing another easy conquest. They had studied human technology and found it inferior to their own. What they had not studied was human nature. They did not understand that humans had spent thousands of years fighting wars against impossible odds and finding ways to win through creativity and stubborn determination. The Zephyrian fleet began to spread into attack formation, their movements precise and coordinated. Energy weapons started charging, casting an ominous glow across their hulls. In a few minutes, they would open fire with enough destructive power to level mountains. Morrison activated the ship's intercom and spoke to his crew. Today, they would show the galaxy what happened when someone threatened humanity. They were outnumbered 12-1 by superior technology, but they had something the aliens did not understand. They had the human refusal to accept defeat. The alien fleet moved into perfect attack formation like a well-rehearsed dance. Admiral Vexathera watched her ships spread across space with satisfaction. The 12 dreadnoughts formed a killing circle around the single human vessel, their weapons trained on the tiny ship that dared to defy the Zephyrian Empire. She had used this same tactic on 17 different worlds, and it had never failed. The human ship looked pathetic compared to her massive warships. Where Zephyrian vessels were built like floating fortresses with thick armor and powerful shields, the human craft appeared almost fragile. Its hull was smooth and dark, designed more for speed than protection. Vexathera could not understand why such a weak-looking ship would challenge her fleet. Captain Morrison studied the tactical display on his bridge as the alien ships moved into position. Each enemy vessel was a masterpiece of military engineering, their hulls gleaming with advanced alloys and energy fields that rippled like water. The aliens had clearly mastered energy manipulation and gravitational control. Their weapons showed massive power signatures that could probably crack a planet's crust. Commander Park leaned over Morrison's shoulder and pointed at the formation pattern. The aliens were using standard Imperial tactics that had been reported by intelligence services across the galaxy. They would surround their target, demand surrender one final time, then concentrate all firepower on a single point until nothing remained. It was effective but predictable. Lieutenant Rodriguez ran detailed scans of the alien vessels from her sensor station. The ships used plasma-based weapons similar to human designs, but with much higher energy output. Their shields were composed of layered energy fields that could probably stop anything in the human arsenal. Their drives appeared to manipulate local gravity to achieve faster-than-light travel. Chief Engineer Wright reported from the engine room that the Retribution's experimental systems were running perfectly. The new fusion reactors were producing stable power output while the quantum processors handled targeting calculations faster than any human pilot could follow. The weapons were charged and ready, though they had never been tested against alien technology. Morrison knew his crew was wondering how one ship could possibly defeat 12. The math seemed impossible no matter how you calculated it. But humans had never been good at accepting mathematical impossibilities. They had a long history of finding ways to win battles they should have lost through superior tactics and innovative thinking. The alien ships completed their formation and began powering their main weapons. Energy readings spiked across the spectrum as plasma cannons charged to full capacity. Morrison could see the glow of weapons systems through the transparent sections of alien hulls. In less than 2 minutes, they would open fire with enough concentrated firepower to vaporize a small moon. Admiral Vexathera opened communications one final time. Her scaled face appeared on the main screen with her 4 eyes blazing with confidence. She offered the humans one last chance to surrender and avoid complete annihilation. No species had ever survived the focused fire of an entire Imperial fleet, and she saw no reason why humans would be different. Morrison looked at his crew before responding. Lieutenant Rodriguez was calmly monitoring the alien targeting systems. Commander Park stood ready at the tactical station. The helmsman held steady on course, despite being surrounded by hostile ships. Not one person on the bridge showed fear or doubt about what they were about to attempt. The captain told the alien admiral that her offer was rejected. Humans did not surrender to invaders, no matter how powerful they appeared. If the Zephyrians wanted Earth, they would have to take it by force. He recommended they reconsider their position while they still had functioning ships. Vexathera's expression changed from confidence to disbelief. No primitive species had ever spoken to her with such arrogance. The human captain seemed genuinely unconcerned about facing 12 superior warships. Either he was insane or he knew something she did not. The communication ended with her promising that humanity would regret their defiance. Morrison activated the ship's general intercom and spoke to his entire crew. They were about to engage in the first battle between humans and an alien empire. The enemy had superior numbers and technology, but humans had advantages the aliens could not understand. They fought not just for victory, but for the survival of their entire species. The Retribution's crew moved to full combat readiness. Damage control teams took positions throughout the ship. Weapons officers ran final checks on targeting systems. The medical bay prepared for casualties. Every person on board understood they were making history, though none of them knew if they would live to see how the story ended. The alien fleet finished charging their weapons and prepared to fire. Massive energy signatures built up across their hulls as plasma cannons reached full power. The space around the human ship began to distort from the gravitational effects of so many weapons targeting the same point. In 30 seconds, the aliens would unleash enough destructive force to turn the Retribution into expanding gas. Morrison gripped the arms of his command chair and watched the countdown display. His ship was fast and well-armed, but it could not survive a direct hit from 12 dreadnoughts firing simultaneously. The key would be making sure they never got that chance. Human survival depended on tactics the aliens had never seen before. The final seconds ticked away as both fleets prepared for battle. The aliens expected a quick victory, followed by the conquest of Earth. The humans planned to show them why underestimating humanity was always a fatal mistake. The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with devastating precision. 12 concentrated plasma beams converged on the exact position where the human ship had been floating moments before. The combined energy output was enough to melt through a mountain, and Admiral Vexathera watched with satisfaction as space lit up like a miniature star. No ship could survive that level of concentrated firepower. But when the energy dissipated and the sensors cleared, the human vessel was gone. Not destroyed, not vaporized. Simply not there anymore. The Retribution had vanished completely from all scanning systems as if it had never existed. Vexathera stared at the empty space where her target should have been reduced to glowing debris. The alien admiral demanded answers from her sensor operators. How could a ship simply disappear from existence? Their equipment was the most advanced in the galaxy, capable of tracking objects across multiple dimensions. No known technology could make a vessel invisible to their scanning arrays. Yet somehow, the primitive human craft had vanished without a trace. 3 seconds later, the Retribution reappeared directly behind the Zephyrian formation. The ship materialized out of empty space, as if it had stepped through an invisible doorway. Captain Morrison's voice came across all Imperial communication frequencies with maddening calmness, informing the aliens that they had missed their target. Commander. Park monitored the alien response from her tactical station. The enemy ships were scrambling to turn around and reacquire their target, but the massive dreadnoughts were not built for quick maneuvers. Their size and mass made them powerful, but slow to react when something unexpected happened. The Retribution had gained precious seconds while they tried to understand what had occurred. Chief Engineer Wright reported that the experimental stealth drive had performed perfectly. The system used controlled micro-jumps through folded space to move the ship instantly from one location to another. The technology was based on theoretical physics that most alien species considered impossible. Humans had turned theory into reality through stubborn refusal to accept limitations. Before the Zephyrian fleet could complete their turn, the Retribution opened fire. But the human weapons were unlike anything the aliens had ever encountered. Instead of energy beams or plasma bursts, the ship launched what appeared to be simple metal projectiles. The aliens watched in confusion as primitive kinetic rounds approached their shields. The first projectile struck the nearest alien ship and passed through its energy shields as if they were not there. The quantum tunneling technology allowed the metal slug to phase shift through energy barriers before rematerializing inside the target. The round punched completely through the alien hull, continued out the other side, and struck a second vessel with equal effectiveness. Admiral Vexithara watched in horror as two of her dreadnoughts began venting atmosphere through perfectly circular holes. Their shields had not even registered the impact. The human projectiles had somehow bypassed their most advanced defensive systems and inflicted critical damage with primitive kinetic weapons. Lieutenant Rodriguez tracked the effectiveness of their opening salvo from her sensor station. The alien ships were built to withstand energy weapons and plasma attacks, but their designers had never considered solid projectiles that could phase through defensive barriers. The quantum tunneling rounds were hitting vital systems throughout the enemy fleet. The Retribution did not pause to admire the damage it had inflicted. Captain Morrison ordered evasive maneuvers as the alien ships tried to target their new position. The human vessel began moving in ways that defied everything the Zephyrians understood about physics and spacecraft design. The ship twisted and turned through space like a fighter plane avoiding surface-to-air missiles. It made impossible course, corrections that should have torn the hull apart from gravitational stress. The crew should have been crushed by acceleration forces that exceeded the tolerance of any known species. Yet the Retribution continued its deadly dance between the larger alien vessels. What the aliens did not understand was that human engineers had solved the acceleration problem through localized gravity manipulation. The crew experienced normal Earth gravity regardless of how violently the ship maneuvered in space. This allowed for movements that would have liquefied the occupants of any conventional spacecraft. Morrison watched the tactical display as his ship weaved between alien vessels like a shark among whales. The enemy dreadnoughts were trying to track his movements, but their targeting systems could not keep up with the Retribution's unpredictable course changes. Every time they locked weapons on his position, the ship was somewhere else. The human vessel's secondary weapons began engaging targets throughout the alien formation. Guided missiles launched from concealed ports and streaked toward enemy ships at incredible speed. But these were not ordinary explosive warheads. Each missile carried an artificial intelligence program that could learn and adapt to enemy countermeasures in real time. Zephyrian point defense systems tried to intercept the incoming missiles, but found their task impossible. As soon as they destroyed one weapon, the remaining missiles adjusted their approach patterns. The artificial intelligence systems shared data instantaneously, learning from each successful interception and finding new ways to penetrate alien defenses. Admiral Vexithara realized with growing panic that her fleet was being systematically destroyed by a single enemy vessel. The humans were using technology and tactics completely outside Zephyrian experience. Their weapons bypassed shields, their ship moved in impossible ways, and their missiles learned from mistakes faster than her crews could adapt. The human captain's voice came across communication channels again, this time with a hint of satisfaction. He informed the alien admiral that this was only the beginning of their demonstration. If she wanted to continue the engagement, her fleet would discover exactly why threatening humanity was considered a terminal mistake. Morrison knew the aliens were starting to understand they had made a serious error in judgment. The Zephyrian Empire was accustomed to easy victories against technologically inferior opponents. They had never faced an enemy that refused to fight by conventional rules or accept conventional limitations. Admiral Vexithara stared at the damage reports flooding her command center. 3 of her dreadnoughts were already crippled and venting atmosphere into space. The human vessel continued to dart between her ships, like an angry hornet, striking wherever her defenses were weakest. This was supposed to be a routine conquest, but somehow it had turned into a nightmare. The alien admiral ordered her remaining ships to close formation and concentrate their firepower. If the humans wanted to dance between her vessels, she would eliminate the spaces they could hide in. 9 massive dreadnoughts began moving toward each other, their weapons charged and ready to fire at the first sign of the enemy ship. Captain Morrison anticipated this tactic and prepared his next surprise. The Retribution had been designed with multiple experimental systems that pushed the boundaries of human engineering. The aliens had seen the stealth drive and quantum tunneling weapons, but they had no idea what other technologies the ship carried. Chief Engineer Wright activated the holographic projection system from his position in the engine room. Suddenly, there were not 1 but 12 human warships scattered throughout the battle zone. Perfect copies of the Retribution appeared in all directions, each one moving independently and targeting different alien vessels. The Zephyrian gunners found themselves unable to distinguish the real ship from the projections. Their targeting computers registered 12 identical vessels with identical energy signatures. Every time they locked weapons on one target, 11 others opened fire from different positions. The holographic technology was so advanced that even their most sophisticated sensors could not tell which ship was real. Commander Park watched with satisfaction as alien weapon fire scattered uselessly among the false targets. The projections were solid enough to register on enemy sensors, but would dissipate harmlessly when struck by energy weapons. Meanwhile, the real Retribution used the confusion to position itself for maximum damage against the alien fleet. Lieutenant Rodriguez coordinated the targeting data for all 12 apparent ships. The computer system controlling the holograms was sophisticated enough to make each projection behave like an independent vessel. Some fired weapons while others performed evasive maneuvers. The aliens were fighting an entire squadron that existed only in their sensors. The real Retribution launched a new wave of guided missiles while the aliens wasted ammunition on shadows. These weapons were even more advanced than the previous generation, equipped with learning algorithms that could adapt to enemy tactics within seconds. Each missile carried enough explosive power to cripple a dreadnought if it found the right target. Admiral Vexithera realized her fleet was being overwhelmed by weapons that should not exist. The human missiles were learning from each defensive action her ships took. When point defense systems shot down one weapon, the others immediately adjusted their approach vectors. It was like fighting an enemy that became smarter with every exchange. The guided missiles found weak points in Zephyrian armor that should have been impossible to detect. They struck at precise locations where hull plating was thinnest or where critical systems were located. Each explosion caused maximum damage with surgical precision, crippling alien ships without completely destroying them. Morrison watched the tactical display as his enemies struggled to fight an opponent they could not understand. The Zephyrians were excellent warriors when facing conventional threats, but humans had never been conventional. They approached warfare as a problem to be solved rather than a test of strength. The alien fleet tried to adapt to the holographic projections by firing at all targets simultaneously. But this strategy only made them waste ammunition faster while the real ship continued its deadly work. The Retribution's weapons found their marks with increasing accuracy as the targeting computers learned the specifications of Zephyrian technology. Chief Wright reported that the ship's power systems were operating at optimal efficiency. The experimental fusion reactors were producing more energy than any previous human vessel had carried. This allowed the Retribution to power systems that would have drained conventional ships within minutes of activation. The alien admiral watched in growing desperation as her fleet was systematically dismantled. The humans were not just defeating her ships. They were doing it with apparent ease. Every tactic she tried was countered by technology or strategies she had never encountered. It was becoming clear that her intelligence reports about primitive humans had been catastrophically wrong. Morrison opened a communication channel to the alien flagship. Admiral Vexathara's image appeared on his screen, but her confident demeanor had been replaced by something approaching panic. Her 4 eyes showed fear for the first time as she realized her empire's expansion had encountered something it could not conquer. The human captain offered the alien admiral a choice. She could continue fighting and watch her entire fleet be destroyed, or she could withdraw immediately and report back to her superiors. Either way, the invasion of Earth would end here and now. Humanity would not tolerate threats to their homeworld. Vexathara demanded to know how a primitive species had developed such advanced technology. The humans were supposed to be barely capable of space travel, yet they were demonstrating capabilities beyond anything in the Zephyrian arsenal. Her empire had conquered 17 star systems without encountering anything like this. Morrison explained that humans had always been good at solving impossible problems. When faced with superior force, they developed superior tactics. When outgunned by better weapons, they built different weapons. The aliens had brought overwhelming firepower to a battle that would be decided by creativity and adaptability. The communication ended with Admiral Vexathara ordering her remaining ships to continue the attack. She refused to accept that her empire could be defeated by a single vessel from a backward world. The Zephyrian fleet prepared for one final assault, concentrating all remaining firepower on the area where they believed the real human ship was located. Morrison smiled grimly as he watched the aliens prepare their last desperate gambit. They still did not understand that humans had spent thousands of years learning how to win battles against impossible odds. Today they would learn why underestimating humanity was always a fatal mistake. The remaining Zephyrian ships gathered into a tight defensive formation as Admiral Vexathara prepared for one final desperate assault. 6 dreadnoughts formed a circle with their weapons pointing outward, ready to fire in all directions simultaneously. If they could not identify the real human ship among the projections, they would simply destroy everything in the battle zone. Captain Morrison watched the alien fleet consolidate their position and knew exactly what they were planning. It was a classic last resort tactic used by commanders who found themselves outmaneuvered and desperate. The aliens would sacrifice accuracy for overwhelming firepower, hoping to catch the retribution in a net of destructive energy. The human captain decided it was time to end this engagement before the aliens could inflict any real damage. The Retribution had demonstrated superior mobility and adaptive weapons, but now Morrison wanted to show them the true power of human engineering. The ship's main weapon had been charging throughout the battle, building up energy for one devastating shot. Chief Engineer Wright reported from the engine room that the antimatter cannon was ready to fire. This weapon represented the pinnacle of human weapons technology, capable of erasing matter at the molecular level. A direct hit would not just destroy an enemy ship but remove it completely from existence. The weapon had never been tested in combat, but theoretical calculations suggested it could penetrate any known defensive system. Lieutenant Rodriguez locked the targeting system onto Admiral Vexathara's flagship. The alien command ship was the largest and most heavily armored vessel in their fleet, protected by multiple layers of energy shielding and reinforced hull plating. If the antimatter cannon could destroy that target, the remaining ships would lose all coordination and morale. Commander Park coordinated the final attack from her tactical station. The holographic projections would provide cover while the real Retribution maneuvered into optimal firing position. Once the antimatter cannon fired, there would be no hiding the ship's location, so the shot had to count. The Retribution dropped its stealth systems and appeared directly in front of the alien formation. Morrison wanted Admiral Vexathara to see exactly what was about to happen to her flagship. The human ship's main cannon began glowing with barely contained energy as antimatter particles were accelerated to near light speed. Admiral Vexathara stared at the human vessel as it materialized, directly ahead of her ship. The enemy captain had abandoned all pretense of hiding and was challenging her entire fleet to a direct confrontation. She could see energy building up in the human weapon system, but her sensors could not identify what type of technology they were facing. The alien admiral ordered all ships to fire simultaneously at the exposed human vessel. 6 dreadnoughts unleashed their full arsenal in a concentrated barrage that should have vaporized any ship ever built. Plasma beams, particle weapons, and gravitational disruptors converged on the Retribution's position with enough force to crack a planet's crust, but the human ship was no longer there when the weapons arrived. At the last possible second, the Retribution had activated its stealth drive and jumped to a position directly above the alien formation. The jump had been timed perfectly to avoid the incoming fire while maintaining target lock on the enemy. Flagship. Morrison gave the order to fire just as his ship materialized in its new position. The antimatter cannon discharged with a brilliant flash of light that briefly outshone the local star. A beam of pure destructive energy lanced down toward Admiral Vexthara's ship at a significant fraction of light speed. The antimatter beam struck the alien flagship's shields and simply erased them from existence. The energy barriers that should have deflected any known weapon offered no resistance to particles moving at relativistic speeds. The beam continued through the ship's hull, vaporizing everything in its path and leaving a perfectly circular hole that went completely through the vessel from top to bottom. Admiral Vexthara had just enough time to realize what was happening before her ship began breaking apart around her. Critical systems failed throughout the vessel as atmosphere rushed out through the hole in her hull. Emergency power kicked in as the main reactors went offline, but it was too late to save the flagship. The remaining Zephyrian ships watched in horror as their command vessel died in front of them. The human weapon had not just damaged the flagship, it had removed a section of the ship down to the atomic level. Nothing they had ever seen could match that level of destructive precision. Captain Morrison opened a communication channel to the surviving alien vessels. 5 dreadnoughts remained, operational, but their formation was broken, and their morale shattered. He offered them the same choice he had given their admiral: surrender and withdraw, or continue fighting and face complete annihilation. The alien ships responded by attempting to flee the battle zone. Their faster-than-light drives began charging. As commanders realized, they were facing technology far beyond their understanding. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that made continued resistance pointless and suicidal, but Morrison was not finished with his demonstration. He could not allow the aliens to escape and report back to their empire that humanity was weak or unprepared. The message had to be clear and unmistakable. Earth was protected by forces that could destroy any threat. The Retribution pursued the fleeing alien ships with ruthless efficiency. The human vessel's superior speed and maneuverability allowed it to catch each dreadnought before their escape drives could fully engage. One by one, the remaining Zephyrian ships were crippled by quantum-tunneling projectiles and guided missiles. Commander Park monitored the systematic destruction of the alien fleet from her tactical station. Each enemy vessel was disabled, rather, then completely destroyed, leaving the crews alive but helpless. Morrison wanted survivors who could carry the story back to the Zephyrian Empire. Within 20 minutes of the first shot being fired, the entire alien invasion force had been neutralized. 11 dreadnoughts drifted powerless in space, while the 12th had been erased by the antimatter cannon. The pride of the Zephyrian Navy had been defeated by a single human warship without sustaining any significant damage. Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They had just fought and won humanity's first interstellar war, but none of them seemed surprised by the outcome. Humans had always found ways to defeat seemingly impossible odds through superior tactics and innovative thinking. The captain knew. This victory was just the beginning. Word of the battle would spread throughout the galaxy, and other alien empires would eventually test human defenses. But today had established an important principle. Earth belonged to humanity, and anyone who threatened it would face the consequences. The debris field that had once been the Zephyrian flagship drifted slowly through space, its twisted metal hull reflecting starlight like broken glass. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Retribution and surveyed the destruction his ship had caused. 11 alien dreadnoughts floated powerless around him, their crews trapped inside disabled vessels far from home. Admiral Vexathera was still alive, though her command ship was barely holding together. Emergency life support kept her and her surviving crew breathing while they waited to see what the humans would do next. She had gone from confident conqueror to helpless prisoner in less than 30 minutes, and the shock of defeat was still settling in. Morrison opened a communication channel to the crippled alien flagship. The main screen showed Admiral Vexathera sitting in what remained of her command center, surrounded by sparking electronics and emergency lighting. Her 4 eyes held a mixture of fear and confusion as she tried to understand how her mighty fleet had been so easily defeated. The human captain spoke in the same calm voice he had used throughout the battle. He informed the alien admiral that her invasion had failed and her fleet was destroyed. However, he was prepared to offer her and her surviving crews safe passage back to Zephyrian space. There was one condition for this mercy. Vexathera asked what the humans wanted in return for sparing their lives. She expected demands for tribute or technology, the usual terms that victorious species imposed on the defeated. What Morrison asked for instead surprised her completely. The captain wanted her to carry a message back to the Zephyrian Empire. Every word had to be delivered exactly as he spoke it, without changes or interpretation. The survival of her crews depended on her willingness to serve as humanity's messenger to the galaxy. Morrison's message was simple but unmistakable. Earth was under human protection, and humans did not share their territory with uninvited guests. Any force that entered the Sol system with hostile intent would meet the same fate as the Zephyrian fleet. Humanity had no interest in conquering other worlds, but they would defend their own with lethal force. The alien admiral asked why the humans were letting them live after what they had tried to do to Earth. Every other species in the galaxy would have executed captured invaders or enslaved them. Showing mercy to defeated enemies was considered a sign of weakness by most civilizations. Morrison explained that dead enemies could not spread warnings to others. He wanted every potential conqueror in the galaxy to know exactly what happened when they threatened humanity. Sometimes the most effective weapon was a survivor who could tell the story of defeat. Commander Park stepped forward and reported that the alien life support systems were failing throughout the fleet. The damaged ships could not maintain atmospheric pressure much longer, and their crews would start dying within hours. If the humans were going to show mercy, they needed to act quickly. The captain ordered Chief Engineer Wright to transfer enough power cells to keep the alien ships operational until they reached the nearest Zephyrian outpost. However, the power would only last for a one-way trip. The aliens would arrive at their destination looking exactly like what they were, the broken remnants of a fleet that had challenged the wrong species. Lieutenant Rodriguez calculated the flight path that would take the crippled alien ships back to Zephyrian space. The journey would take several weeks with their damaged engines, giving the crews plenty of time to think about what they had experienced. By the time they reached home, the story would be polished and ready to spread throughout their empire. Admiral Vexathera accepted the human terms because she had no other choice. Her fleet was helpless, and her crews were dying. She promised to deliver Morrison's message word for word to the Zephyrian High Command. The defeat would be reported honestly, along with a detailed analysis of human capabilities. Morrison warned the alien admiral that any future attempts to invade human space would be met with far less mercy. This encounter had been a demonstration of defensive capabilities. If the Zephyrians or their allies returned with hostile intent, humanity would bring the war to their homeworlds. The choice was entirely theirs. The communication ended as human repair crews began transferring power cells to the alien ships. Morrison wanted the Zephyrians to survive their journey home, but he also wanted them to arrive looking defeated and broken. The visual impact would be almost as important as the verbal message. Chief Wright supervised the power transfer operation while maintaining careful security. Human crew members worked alongside alien engineers to install the emergency power systems, but weapons were kept ready in case of treachery. Trust was not part of this arrangement, only mutual necessity. The alien crews worked with quiet efficiency, grateful to be alive but humiliated by their defeat. Many of them had participated in the conquest of other worlds and had never imagined being on the receiving end of such overwhelming force. The humans had shown them what it felt like to be completely outmatched. Morrison returned to his command chair and began composing his report to Earth Command. The first contact with an alien empire had resulted in complete human victory, but he knew this was only the beginning. Word would spread through the galaxy that humanity was not the easy target it appeared to be. The retribution had proven that human engineering and tactics could overcome superior numbers and technology, but more importantly, the battle had established humanity's reputation as a species that could not be conquered or intimidated. Future enemies would think twice before challenging a race that fought with such devastating effectiveness. Commander, Park approached the captain's chair with a tactical analysis of the engagement. The alien ships had been well-designed and powerfully armed, but their crews had been unprepared for unconventional warfare. Human victory had come from superior adaptability rather than superior firepower. Morrison studied the data from the battle, while watching the alien ships prepare to depart. In a few hours, they would begin their long journey home, carrying news of humanity's existence to the wider galaxy. The universe was about to learn that Earth was defended by a species that refused to accept defeat. The crippled Zephyrian fleet began its slow journey back to their empire, leaving behind a debris field that would orbit the sun for millions of years. Captain Morrison watched the alien ships disappear into the darkness and knew he had just changed the course of galactic history. Humanity was no longer an unknown species hiding on a single world. They were now a recognized military power. The retribution turned toward Earth and began the journey home. The ship had performed perfectly during its first combat mission, proving that human engineering could compete with the best technology in the galaxy. Every system had functioned exactly as designed, from the quantum tunneling weapons to the antimatter cannon. Morrison activated the ship's communication array and sent a message to Earth Command. The first alien invasion had been repelled with complete success. All enemy vessels had been neutralized, and surviving crews were being sent home with a clear warning about future attempts to threaten human space. The Sol system was secure. Chief Engineer Wright ran diagnostic scans on all ship systems while they traveled toward Earth. The experimental weapons had performed beyond expectations, with zero malfunctions during the entire engagement. The stealth drive had operated flawlessly, allowing the ship to appear and disappear at will throughout the battle. Commander Park compiled a detailed tactical report on alien capabilities and weaknesses. The Zephyrian ships had been impressive, but predictable, following standard military doctrine that made them vulnerable to unconventional attacks. Their reliance on energy shields had been their downfall when faced with phase-shifting projectiles. Lieutenant Rodriguez monitored subspace communication frequencies as news of the battle began to spread. The Zephyrian survivors were already sending encrypted messages to their home base, reporting their defeat and warning about human capabilities. Within days, every major power in the galaxy would know about the engagement. The reaction from alien civilizations was immediate and dramatic. Species that had considered humanity a potential target suddenly began reassessing their expansion plans. The Zephyrian Empire issued official warnings to avoid the Sol system at all costs. Other empires started gathering intelligence on human technology and military capabilities. Morrison read the intelligence reports as they came in through diplomatic channels. The galactic community was buzzing with speculation about how a single human ship had defeated an entire Imperial fleet. Some species refused to believe the reports, while others began making plans to establish peaceful contact with humanity. The captain knew this was exactly the reaction he had hoped for. Humans did not want to fight wars across the galaxy, but they needed other species to understand that Earth was not available for conquest. Fear would provide better protection than any defensive fleet. Commander Park reported that long-range sensors were detecting increased alien activity near human space. Several species were sending scout ships to observe from a safe distance, trying to gather information about human capabilities without triggering a hostile response. None of them were approaching close enough to be considered threats. Morrison decided to allow the alien observers to watch human activities. Let them see cargo ships moving between Earth and the outer colonies. Let them observe construction work on new space stations and defensive platforms. The more they learned about human industriousness, the less likely they would be to consider invasion. The Retribution arrived at Earth to find the entire planet celebrating humanity's first interstellar victory. News of the battle had reached home hours before the ship's return, and people everywhere were finally feeling safe from alien threats. The psychological impact was almost as important as the military success. Earth Command had already begun implementing new defensive strategies based on the battle report. More ships like the Retribution were being designed and built, incorporating lessons learned from the engagement with the Zephyrians. Humanity would not depend on a single vessel to protect their homeworld. Morrison met with military leaders and government officials to discuss the implications of first contact. The galaxy now knew that humans existed and were capable of defending themselves. This would bring opportunities for trade and diplomacy, but also new threats from species that saw humanity as competition. Chief Wright was assigned to lead the development of improved weapon systems based on combat data from the alien encounter. The quantum tunneling technology had proven devastatingly effective, but there was always room for improvement. Human engineers were already working on next-generation systems. The captain received reports from intelligence services about alien reactions to the battle. The Zephyrian Empire had officially declared the Sol system off-limits to all Imperial forces. Several other aggressive species had quietly canceled expansion plans that would have brought them into conflict with humanity. But not all alien reactions were peaceful. Some species viewed humanity as a potential threat that needed to be eliminated before it could grow stronger. Intelligence reports suggested that at least 3 major powers were considering preemptive strikes against Earth, while human defenses were still limited. Morrison knew the victory over the Zephyrians was just the beginning of humanity's challenges. Other aliens would test human resolve with different tactics and superior technology. The galaxy was full of species that had been conquering worlds for thousands of years, and some of them would not be deterred by a single defeat. The Retribution was assigned to patrol the outer system while new defensive ships were constructed. Morrison's crew had proven themselves in combat and earned the right to guard humanity's frontier. They would be the first line of defense against whatever threats emerged from the darkness between stars. Lieutenant Rodriguez established a network of monitoring stations throughout the Sol system to detect approaching alien vessels. Any ship that entered human space without permission would be tracked and intercepted before it could threaten Earth or the colonies. Humanity would never again be caught unprepared. Commander Park began training new crews for the additional ships under construction. The tactics that had defeated the Zephyrians would be taught to every human captain, along with improvements based on combat experience. Future enemies would face not one experimental vessel, but an entire fleet of advanced warships. Morrison stood on his bridge and looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in that vast darkness, other species were planning their next move. Humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible, and now they would have to live with the consequences of that introduction. 6 months after the battle with the Zephyrian fleet, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy peace around human space. Captain Morrison stood on the observation deck of the New Earth Defense Station and watched construction crews finishing work on humanity's first orbital fortress. The massive structure bristled with weapons designed to protect the homeworld from any future invasion. Admiral Vexa Thera had kept her promise and delivered Morrison's message to the Zephyrian High Command. The Imperial Council had officially declared the Sol system a forbidden zone and warned all member species to avoid contact with humanity. The story of their fleet's destruction had spread throughout their empire, creating a legend about the deadly humans who could destroy ships with invisible weapons. But the Zephyrians were not the only ones who had received the message. The tale of humanity's victory had traveled through subspace communication networks to every corner of the galaxy. Some species interpreted it as a warning to be heeded, while others saw it as a challenge to be met. The universe was full of civilizations that had never been defeated, and some of them were curious about human capabilities. Morrison received regular intelligence reports about alien activities near human space. 3 different species had established observation posts just outside the Sol system, monitoring human activities with sophisticated sensor arrays. They maintained careful distance to avoid triggering defensive responses, but their presence was a constant reminder that humanity was being watched. The captain had been promoted to admiral and given command of the entire Earth defense fleet. 5 ships like the Retribution were now operational, with more under construction in orbital shipyards. Each vessel incorporated improvements based on combat data from the Zephyrian encounter, making them even more effective than the original prototype. Commander Park now commanded her own ship, the UES Defiance, and led regular patrols through the outer system. Her crew had trained extensively with the new weapon systems and holographic projectors, perfecting tactics that could multiply their apparent numbers during combat. Any alien force that approached Earth would face what appeared to be an entire fleet. Chief Engineer Wright had been assigned to develop even more advanced technologies for the next generation of human warships. His team was working on weapons that could manipulate space-time itself, creating localized distortions that would make enemy ships simply cease to exist. The theoretical mathematics were promising, but practical applications remained years away. Lieutenant Rodriguez commanded the Sol System Monitoring Network, a grid of sensor stations that could detect approaching spacecraft from light years away. Any vessel entering human space was automatically tracked and analyzed, with identification data transmitted to the defense fleet within seconds. Nothing could approach Earth without being noticed. The galaxy's reaction to humanity had been mixed, but largely cautious. Several peaceful species had requested diplomatic contact, hoping to establish trade relationships with the newcomers. These requests were being carefully evaluated by Earth government, which was still developing policies for dealing with alien civilizations. Morrison reviewed the latest diplomatic proposals from his office on the defense station. The Kepler Consortium wanted to trade raw materials for human-manufactured goods. The Altair Republic offered scientific exchanges that could advance both civilizations. Even the powerful vegan empire had expressed interest in establishing formal relations. But not all alien contact was peaceful. Intelligence reports indicated that the Draco Confederation was mobilizing a massive fleet with the specific intention of testing human defenses. Unlike the Zephyrians, who had expected easy victory, the Draconians were preparing for a serious war against a capable opponent. The Admiral knew that humanity's reputation as a military power was both protection and liability. Species that might have ignored Earth were now paying attention, and some of them saw humans as potential threats to be eliminated. The victory over the Zephyrians had bought time, but it had also marked humanity as a rising power. Morrison walked through the defense station's command center, where officers monitored the entire Sol system from massive holographic displays. Red icons marked the positions of alien observation posts, while green indicators showed human patrol routes and defensive positions. The display looked like a three-dimensional chess game with interstellar stakes. The station's communication array received a priority message from Earth Command. Long-range sensors had detected a large fleet approaching from the direction of Draco space. Initial analysis suggested at least 30 warships, all heavily armed and moving at maximum speed toward the Sol system. The test that humanity had been preparing for was finally coming. Morrison activated the general alert and watched his staff spring into action. Defense fleet ships began moving to intercept positions, while automated systems powered up weapons and shields throughout the system. The orbital fortresses armed their main cannons and prepared to defend Earth against whatever was approaching. The Admiral opened a communication channel to all human ships and stations. His voice carried to every crew member in the defense fleet as he explained the situation. A large alien force was approaching with unknown intentions, and humanity would meet them with the same determination they had shown against the Zephyrians. But this time would be different. The approaching Draconians had studied human tactics and prepared countermeasures for quantum tunneling weapons and holographic projectors. They were bringing superior numbers and advanced technology specifically designed to defeat human innovations. The battle would test everything humanity had learned about interstellar warfare. Morrison looked out at the stars and thought about how much had changed since that first encounter with Admiral Vexus Thera. Humanity had gone from an unknown species to a recognized military power in less than a year. They had gained the respect of some aliens and the fear of others, but most importantly, they had gained time to prepare for greater challenges. The defense fleet moved into position as the approaching alien force grew larger on long-range sensors. 30 Draconian warships against 5 human vessels seemed like impossible odds. But Morrison remembered that the Retribution had faced 12 Zephyrian dreadnoughts and emerged victorious. Humans specialized in winning battles they were supposed to lose. The Admiral activated his command chair's communication system and prepared to address the approaching aliens. Whatever they wanted from humanity, they would discover that Earth was protected by a species that had turned warfare into an art form. The galaxy was about to learn another lesson about the price of threatening human civilization. The stars held their secrets, but one truth had become clear throughout the galaxy. Humanity had announced its presence among the stars, and they were here to stay. Any species that tested that resolve would face the same fate as the Zephyrian fleet that had encountered a human warship and regretted it instantly. The age of human expansion had begun, and the universe would never be the same.